Mouse and keyboard is the superior input, but that doesn't mean that we can't level the playing field. One of the key differences that a mouse has over controller is that you get out of it what you put into it. A mouse doesn't have dead zones, ramp up delays, or extra pitch, and if you don't know what any of that means, it's different things that are applied to controller settings. When you enter your ALC settings, they enable us to equalize our gameplay with mouse and keyboard players. These are the settings that you want to alter. To have a primarily linear input on your ALC settings, turn your dead zone down as low as possible. You'll see here that if I turn it off completely, I'm going to get stick drift. This controller has been, we'll say loved. It's aged quite a bit. So go back to your ALC settings and turn it up to 3%. Now, I'm still getting a very minor amount of stick drift. When I touch the thumbstick and barely put any pressure on it, it's moving. It doesn't feel too good. So what we're going to do is put it back up to the 5 that I'm comfortable with, and this way, even just super gentle touches aren't going to move the stick completely, which is going to be very beneficial during hipfire fights. 5% seems to be the sweet spot here, but it's whatever you feel comfortable with. So find one that's good for you. Next, we want to go to outer threshold and turn that off completely. If you look here on the diagram on the right, you'll see as I turn it up, that orange circle gets smaller. What that is when your stick input hits the same angle as that orange circle, it goes, okay, we are at full maximum input now. That's important later when we go through a couple of other settings. So what you want to do is turn that off completely because, again, we're trying to emulate a mouse here and get the exact output of what we input. Moving on to response curve, you want this off as well because we are going for a primarily linear input. If you move it here, you see that it bows in and it changes how everything feels in-game. The game wants us to put it at a 10 to emulate other response curves, however, turning this off is what you're going to want to do. Now is the part where it gets uncomfortable. I'm going to tell you to turn 8 settings off: turning extra yaw, turning extra pitch, turning ramp up time, and turning ramp up delay, as well as the 4 ADS varieties of those settings. This is going to completely change the way your controller feels, but that's what we want. Turning extra yaw, and for that matter, turning extra pitch, react to your outer threshold, which we have turned off. Basically, when your stick input hits the angle of that orange circle, that's when it would happen. The turning extra yaw means that once it hits the maximum threshold, you would turn around faster. However, that doesn't really help with anything except turning and running away, which we can fix by upgrading our yaw speed gradually as we get used to these settings. You want your yaw speed, basically how much you turn left and right, to be the same all the way through and be at a level where you're comfortable turning and climbing and running away from a fight if you have to, or regrouping without having to rely on that extra to kick in, because it can really mess up your aim and it can be disorienting. With these settings off, the controller is now going to respond as if we're using a linear response curve. Maybe you're wondering, why do we have ALC settings enabled? There's a linear response curve in the basic settings. You're completely right, but the problem is there are only 8 sensitivities for you to choose from for both look and ADS. Here, you have values from 0 to 500, so you can customize it specifically, fine tailor it to what you want. You'll see here that my pitch speed is at a 160, but I can set it to any value, 195, 287, depending on where you click on the bar, or you can use your D-pad left and right to turn it up in values of 10. I'm going to put mine back on 160, where I feel comfortable with. But the thing is, you can just change this to whatever you want. You don't have to rely on just 8 basic stock settings. You will immediately notice the lack of ramp up yaw, so you're not going to feel that speed up when you turn around. However, the last thing that is going to actually get in the way of feeling a completely linear mouse-like input is aim assist. Now, I'm not going to recommend you turn this off because it does exist for a reason, but if I go over this target here, watch. I'm going to go from here, same input. You can feel that bit of a slowdown. I didn't change the input on the stick whatsoever. We go faster, you can feel the slowdown when it goes over the target over there, over here, over there. You can kind of feel it. So that is going to get in the way, but it's something that you can manage. You've already been managing with it for so long. The rest of the input changes, keep aim assist on. As you toy around with your look and your ADS settings, you'll find that it's tricky to hit targets at first, whether you're aiming down sight or hip firing. It's okay to start on a lower sensitivity at first until you get used to the lack of response curve. However, you do want to gradually increase that sensitivity so things like movement, jumping, climbing, or even just turning around in a fight and running the other way don't become a hindrance to you. Overall, this allows you to have the fastest response times during fights, especially if you commit to gradually increasing your sensitivity until you find a spot that you're comfortable with. You want your sensitivity to be somewhere where you can still turn and exit a fight or regroup, get behind cover, slide jump, whatever the case is, without going super slow and giving your enemy all the time they need to take you down.